Welcome to True Tomorrows, the show where we try to, sort through the future from science fiction. I'm Adrian Smith, and today we're looking at a story that asks, what happens when we fix a problem? But by doing that, we create an even bigger one.
I'm Julia Jones, and I'm here to help figure out how plausible that actually is. Plus, we'll be sure to explore some pretty deep philosophical questions about technology and humanity along the way.
Sounds good to me.
Hmm.
So imagine a world where it's always winter ruled by
Mm-hmm.
these terrifying frost spirits. And that's where we find our heroes, a group called the Frostbound Fellowship, who are, determined to bring back the sun.
Okay, got it. It sounds like a pretty classic fantasy setup, but I have a feeling things are going to get a little more complicated.
Yeah, you could say that the story picks up speed with the Fellowship's quest to end this eternal winter. They're not just using any old tools, though. They're turning to ancient runes and believe they can actually reawaken a sleeping sun using their song.
Ancient knowledge to solve modern problems, huh? That's interesting. We see this theme come up quite a bit in our world, too, especially with the renewed interest in traditional ecological knowledge. But this story, it seems to highlight the potential dangers of messing with natural cycles, even if you have good intentions.
Exactly. They actually succeed in thawing the world,
Mm-hmm.
but their victory isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's not a gradual warming. Instead, it's this scorching heat wave, floods, uncontrollable plant growth. The whole ecosystem is thrown into chaos.
Wow, that's intense. It reminds me of all the worries around climate change, the potential for unintended consequences, even when we're trying to do good. It almost feels like a cautionary tale about how connected ecosystems are and how we need to be more careful and consider the long-term impacts of our actions.
And it gets crazier. Remember those frost spirits I mentioned? The ones who were in charge? Well, now they're the ones running away scared, becoming refugees in a world they don't recognize anymore.
So the villains become the victims. Interesting. I like how the story flips it around and forces us to question our own assumptions about who we see as a threat, especially when we're trying to fix things. It reminds us that what seems like a simple fix on the surface can impact others in ways we don't expect.
And that's exactly what the story is trying to tell us. By the end, the Frostbound Fellowship realizes they've traded one extreme for another. They become architects of a victory that's way worse than any winter. Adrift in a world they reshaped but don't understand.
That's a powerful image. It makes you think, what does progress really mean? Is it just getting what you want no matter what? Or is it about finding a balance and living in harmony with what's already there? It's something we all need to think about, especially as technology keeps advancing so quickly.
Speaking of technology, the True Tomorrows podcast has a guide that explains some of the themes and ideas we explore on the show. I thought it'd be cool to bring it into our conversation today,
Hmm.
especially since it talks about something called the mirror effect.
A meta-narrative about our meta-narrative. Now we're talking. What exactly is this mirror effect?
So the guide describes it as how technology reflects what we want, our insecurities and our hopes. Like holding a mirror up to ourselves and seeing everything we want and everything we're afraid of reflected back.
Oh, I see what you mean. So in the last solstice, the Frostbound Fellowship, they wanted warmth and sunlight. They wanted to control their environment. But their solution, the ancient runes and songs, ended up mirroring their fear of the never-ending winter, which led to a solution that was just as bad and scary.
Exactly. It's a great example of how trying to control the world around us can backfire and actually make our fears worse, leading to all these unintended consequences. The guide goes on to talk about how this mirror effect shows up everywhere, from algorithms that shape our online experience to AI that reflects our own biases.
It makes you realize we need to be aware of how our desires and fears can affect how technology is developed and used. It also shows how important critical thinking is when we're trying to figure out what the consequences of new technology might be. What might seem like progress might just be making the problems worse.
That's a really insightful point. And that's just one of the many ideas explored in the True Tomorrows podcast guide. Are you ready to jump into another one?
Absolutely. Let's do it. What else does the guide say about the unexpected ways technology could shape our future? Thinking about the fellowship and how they relied on ancient knowledge and that quick fix, it reminds me of another idea from the True Tomorrows podcast guide, the convenience trap.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. For anyone who just joined us, the convenience trap is the idea that we're always trying to make life easier. But we might be losing some important skills and knowledge in the process.
Exactly. We're giving more and more tasks to technology, which seems awesome at first. But it can make us depend too much on these technological crutches. And the guide asks a big question. What happens if those crutches disappear?
Right? Like with the Frostbound Fellowship. They had that ancient solution ready to go. But did they even try to, adapt to the winter. Find ways to live in that frozen world.
That's a great point. The convenience of that solution might have stopped them from trying other things, from building the resilience they would have needed to face any challenge.
It's like they traded being self-reliant for convenience.
Mm.
And in the end, that made them more vulnerable. And this isn't just a problem in stories, is it?
No way. Think about our world. We're so used to technology solving our problems, GPS, instant communication. It's amazing. But have we lost some of our ability to think for ourselves and solve problems on our own? What if the power goes out, the internet crashes, or the AI gives us bad directions?
It is a little scary when you think about it that way. We might be losing skills that we really need. And that could be a big problem later on. It's like we're so busy making today easy that we're not ready for the surprises tomorrow might bring.
That's why these true tomorrow stories are so important. They make us look at the potential problems of technology advancing too quickly. But they also remind us that we can choose a different path.
Yeah. We can choose to be aware of what we might be losing. We can choose to get better at thinking critically and solving problems. And we can choose to have a more balanced relationship with technology, using its power without giving up our own independence and strength.
I totally agree. And speaking of critical thinking, the guide mentions something called the good enough dilemma. I think it fits perfectly with what we're talking about.
Okay. Remind me, what's the good enough dilemma again?
It's the idea that we might be getting too comfortable with good enough solutions from technology. We have these really advanced algorithms and AI that seem to have all the answers.
But are those answers always the best?
Yeah.
Are we letting technology decide what's acceptable, even if it's not really the best we can do?
Exactly. That's the problem. We see an AI-generated image or text and think, wow, that's pretty good. But are we forgetting what humans can create? Are we trading quality and depth for speed and ease?
It's something to consider, especially as this technology becomes more and more a part of our lives. I mean, if we're always settling for good enough, are we really pushing ourselves to be the best we can be? Are we aiming high enough for the future we want?
Right. And back to the last solstice, it's like the Frostbound Fellowship did the same thing. They took that ancient solution because it was good enough without really asking if it was the best. They didn't think about other options. They didn't really consider the downsides.
And as we saw, that lack of critical thinking had some pretty bad consequences. It reminds us that we can't just trust technology to solve all our problems. We need to be smart about it. Ask tough questions, think about the possible problems, and always try to find something better than just good enough.
Absolutely. And speaking of pushing the limits of what's possible, the True Tomorrow's podcast guide also talks about digital immortality, something I'm sure a lot of our listeners have thought about.
Yeah, it's a cool idea, isn't it? That we could live on in some digital form. It's both fascinating and a little creepy.
For sure. The guide asks some really interesting questions about what digital immortality would actually mean. Would a bunch of data, even if it's huge and detailed, really be the same as a human life? Could it ever really capture who we are, our memories, our emotions, or experiences?
The last solstice actually touches on legacy and preservation in a really interesting way. The Frostbound Fellowship were so focused on saving their way of life, their traditions. But by doing that, they destroyed the very place that supported those traditions.
It's like they were holding on to a still image of themselves, a frozen picture of the past, instead of changing and evolving. Makes you wonder if our obsession with saving our digital selves might be making us miss out on actually living in the moment. Are we giving up real experiences to create a digital copy that can never really capture who we are?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And even though digital immortality is still mostly science fiction, it shows how important it is to find a balance between remembering the past and embracing the future.
Totally. It's not about rejecting technology or trying to stop time. It's about finding a way to use these advancements to make us more human, not less.
I think that's a perfect way to move into the last part of our deep dive into the last solstice and the True Tomorrow's podcast guide. There's one more concept we need to talk about, and it might just be the key to navigating this complex future we're facing together.
I'm ready. What's this last piece?
Welcome back to True Tomorrow's. I feel like my brain is about to explode with all this future talk.
Me too. The story's been quite a ride, hasn't it? We've gone from freezing cold to burning hot, thought about the downsides of convenience, and even dipped our toes into digital immortality.
Yeah, it's been wild. But there's one more stop on our True Tomorrow's journey today, and it's something we can all relate to. Choice overload.
Ah, yes. The modern problem of having too many choices. So many that we can't even decide. Swipe left or right, upgrade now or wait for the next version. It's exhausting.
It really is. And the Frostbound Fellowship, they had a big choice too, right? live with a never-ending winter or try to change it. But what if they had other options? What if their world wasn't so black and white?
I see what you mean. Maybe if they knew how to adapt to the winter, to find creative solutions within those limits, they wouldn't have felt so pressured to do something so drastic and destructive.
It's like they were stuck in this either mindset, winter or no winter. But what if they had considered a third option, a fourth, a fifth? What if they had embraced the complexity instead of trying to force a simple solution?
Exactly. And that's where technology can be so powerful. It's not just about fixing problems, but about giving us more choices, opening up new paths we might not have even thought of.
Right. Instead of just escaping the winter, imagine if technology helped us create a world where we could thrive in it, where those harsh conditions actually make us stronger and more innovative.
Yeah. That's a future I'd like to see. But let's be honest, technology can also make choice overload worse. We're always getting bombarded with new gadgets, new apps, new everything. It's easy to get caught up in wanting more and more, always chasing the next big thing.
So how do we find that balance? How do we deal with all these choices without getting overwhelmed or losing sight of what really matters? Does the True Tomorrow's podcast guide have any wisdom for us?
Well, it doesn't give us a step-by-step plan, but it does say that being mindful is important. Before we click buy or download that new app, it tells us to stop and ask ourselves, why am I choosing this? Does it fit with what I believe in, what I want to achieve my vision for the future? Or am I just reacting to pressure, to the fear of missing out?
It's about taking back control, right? Not letting algorithms and ads tell us what to do, but making our own choices that align with what we really want.
Exactly. And sometimes that means choosing less, simplifying our lives, focusing on what's important, and letting go of the stuff that's just clogging up our minds and our lives.
It's interesting because the last solstice is almost like a warning against wanting more, wanting control, wanting a perfect world. The Frostbound Fellowship thought they were creating paradise, but they ended up with chaos.
It's a good reminder that sometimes embracing limits, accepting that things aren't perfect, and working with what we have can actually lead to better, more sustainable solutions.
Well said. I think that's the perfect True Tomorrow's takeaway. We don't need to be afraid of the future, but we do need to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism, critical thinking, and maybe even a little humility.
Absolutely. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all figuring this out together. One choice, one innovation, one true tomorrow at a time.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through the possibilities and the pitfalls of the future. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.